So today is going to be a big calculator day. So make sure that as you're working today, you have your calculator handy and ready to use. I'm going to teach from the Inspire, and if you have a different kind of calculator, I really want to encourage you to reach out to me if you're having trouble with any of these skills on your particular machine. We're also going to estimate limits from tables. We'll use our calculator to do that, but there are a lot of other skills on your calculator that I want to make sure I talk about with you. So first of all, the College Board requires you to have 4 skills and only 4 skills on your calculator. So you can successfully complete the AP test if you have these 4 skills. The questions are not written to make use of any other features of your calculator. You must be able to graph a function in an appropriate window. So that means that you have to be comfortable enough with analyzing your function so that you can set your window correctly. Oftentimes, students come to my class knowing how to do Zoom Fit, but I actually prefer Zoom window settings so that I can set my own window appropriately the way I want it. It gives you a little more control. You also have to be able to find the zeros of a function or the intersection of 2 different functions on your grapher, and that's with the menu Analyze Graph feature of your calculator. Eventually, you will have to take a derivative of a function, but you don't even know what that means. So I'll teach you that when you need it. And eventually, you're going to have to know how to find the definite integral. But again, you don't know what this means. So I will teach you that when you need it. The College Board expects your final answer to always be correct to 3 places to the right of the decimal. The College Board expects you not to round in the middle of your work, but to use all of the available decimal places to you throughout your calculations. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that. There are some calculator skills that are nice to have and that help you, first of all, with this deal, with making sure that your final answer is correctly rounded, and kind of help you save time because the time is an issue as you're taking your AP test. So first of all, it's nice to be able to define a function, and I'll show you how to do that. It's nice to be able to save values in a variable so you can save yourself some time and keystrokes. It's also nice to be able to use the ANDS feature of your calculator to get the answer so that you're not rounding along the way. You should be able to use your tables on your calculator. You should know about Control C to copy a value and Control V to paste a value from one window to another. And then I really want you to have a thorough understanding of your calculator settings and what your settings should be for my class. We are going to be doing the example of finding the limit as x approaches 0 and infinity and negative infinity of sine of x over x. We have definitely seen these limits before, but we're going to use a calculator and tables to find these values. All right, so first of all, we have a function. The function is sine x over x. So the way you define a function is you need to be in a calculator screen. And then you name your function. So f of x, you can name it any letter of x that you want. And then if you hit control, this thing next to the 9, there's a colon equals. So control this thing next to the 9. So colon equals is how you define a function. So we're going to define our function as sine of x over x. And all it should say at this point is done. But let's say I wanted to know what f of 2 was. I can just type f of 2 and it would give me this value. This value is a big, long, complicated decimal. I know I'm not supposed to round. So one way that I can use this value is I can highlight it with my cursor and I can do Control C, which will copy it. And then I can do Control V, which will paste it. So that's one way I can save that value. Another way I can save that value is there's this little ands word above the negative sign on your calculator. So I can also hit Control ands, and that will always be that value as well. And a third way that I can save that value is I can use the stow feature of the calculator. Stow is short for store. It's right above var. So I can hit Control var to get to stow, and then I can give it a letter. This is really powerful because then I can use it later and I don't have to go through and scroll and find it. Anytime I type an A now, A will represent that big long decimal. So that's a useful thing to know. You can use any letter, including E. This is E, which is dangerous because a lot of times people type that kind of E and think they're typing Euler's number, but it's not Euler's number. So one thing you could do is you could do E to the 1 power, and you could store that as E so that you never have to worry about whether you're using the wrong kind of E for your calculator. All values are saved on your calculator until you get rid of them. So you can get rid of everything by hitting Menu, Actions, and then you can clear your, you could delete one variable or you could clear all your variables at this point. I actually strongly recommend that you save that E to the 1 power as E so that whether you use this E or this E, you're doing the same thing. So that's my advice for that. And then don't clear your variables. You don't really have to ever clear your variables because you can always just save something new on top of that variable. All right. So then the other thing I should be able to do is I should be able to graph this function, which I've defined as sine of x over x. So I'm going to add a page, and I'm going to choose graphs. I could type sine of x over x again here, but I'm actually going to type f of x because I've defined that function as f of x, and so there's a graph of sine x over x. I'm actually going to back up. Do we know we're in radians? And what kind of rounding is going on our calculators? So that's a settings issue. We're going to want to check settings. There are 2 places to check settings. First of all, there's this handy little thing in the top that tells me that I actually am in radians. For calculus, you should always be in radians, but I'm going to kind of go through how to change that too. If you hit the home button, there's option 5 is settings. You can type a 5 or you can arrow over to it. And then we're going to do document settings, which is option 2. Your display digits should be float. If you use the display digits float, your calculator will give you as many decimals as it possibly can. If you use float with a number after it, your calculator will try to give you that many decimals. We always want it to use the default of as many as it possibly can. So we're going to leave our display digits as float or change it to float. Our angle should be radians. If you're in physics, I know you have to go back and forth to degrees and radians, but for my class, we will always be in radians. The only other thing you might want to change is you might want to change your calculation mode. Mine is currently in auto, so that means that sometimes my answer will be an exact answer with like square root of 2 over 2. Sometimes it will be an approximate answer, but it will make the decision for me. You can change it to approximate if you want to. You can leave it as auto if you want to. It's up to you. So then you can make that your default, and if you make that your default setting, you will always have the same settings for every document that you open. So I would recommend that you do make that your default setting. And then we want to go back to our graph, so we're going to hit 4 current to get back to the document we had. The tricky thing about these calculators is there are actually 2 places where you need to change your settings. So in a graphing window, if you hit menu, there's a settings option in your menu. So this is a little bit unfortunate that this is the other place where you have to change your settings. And in this place, your graphing angle needs to be radian. And again, your display digits needs to be float. Those are the 2 changes to make here. Geometry angle isn't going to matter. We won't be using the geometry tools on the calculator. So you can make that your default as well. All right. finally, we're going to get to what today's lesson is. This is a lot of information, so just feel free to watch this video as many times as you need. Okay, I would like a table of values for this so that I can examine what is the limit as x approaches 0. So I'm going to hit Menu, and I'm going to choose Table, Split Screen Table. I'm also going to notice at this point that if I want to get rid of that table, I can hit Control-T, or if I want to go back to having a split screen table, I can hit Control-T. So that's nice to know. You can get back and forth to that. So this table is now the x coordinate is counting by ones, and we've got the y coordinate here. One problem is that I want to know what's going on as x gets close to 0. Right now, it looks like at 0, my function is undefined, which makes sense because I'm dividing by 0, so my function doesn't exist. And I can't really tell, because these numbers are not very close to 0, what's going on from the table. So in order to fix that, I can go Menu, and in the table, I'm going to choose to edit table settings. Instead of starting at -3, I'm going to start at -1, and I'm going to do a step of 0.01. So that's just what I'm counting by in this table. So if I hit OK, now my x coordinates are getting bigger by 1,000th at a time, and so I can kind of tell, oh, am I going the wrong way? I am going the wrong way, so I'm going to go back up. As I get closer to 0, I'm going the wrong way again. As I get closer to 0, I shouldn't have started there. I'm going to go back to my settings. It's my first time using a calculator. All right, so I'm going to go back to table settings. I don't want to start way at 1. I'm going to start at -0.01 so that I don't have to scroll so far. Okay, so now I'm getting closer and closer to 0. Look at my value here. It's 0.99998. So this is really, really close to 1. And from the other direction as well, it's really, really close to 1. So I feel very confident in saying that my limit is approaching 1. I don't care, again, what's happening at 0. The function is undefined at 0, but these are some x coordinates that are very, very close to 0 in both directions, and both of the y coordinates are very, very close to 1. So that's how I would use a table to convince myself that that limit is 1. I can kind of see it on the graph, but the table is a nice way to see it as well. And then I would like to do the limit as x goes to infinity as well. So I'm going to change my table settings one more time, and I'm going to start at 1,000, and I'm going to count by hundreds. So that I can see what's going on as x goes to infinity. And I notice that, oh, these are in scientific notation. They're jumping around. They're not consistent, but they're in scientific notation, and they are getting closer and closer to 0. So they're not actually jumping, they're going from positive to negative. They're not exactly jumping, but they are really, really close to 0 and kind of bouncing around a lot. Remember the oscillation that we talked about in this function? You can kind of see that in the table as well. But I'm pretty convinced that as my x coordinates get bigger, my function is getting closer and closer to 0. I can also change my settings one more time, and I can say I would like to know what's going on as my function gets closer and closer to -1,000. So I'm going to count by negative hundreds. Closer and closer to negative infinity. I'm starting at -1,000. I'm counting by hundreds. And what I notice again is that these values are getting closer and closer to 0, because again, that's scientific notation. So this is negative 0.00026. It's really close to 0. And as I go even further down, it gets closer and closer to 0. So I feel very confident that my limit is 0 as x goes to negative infinity as well. All right, this was a lot of calculator stuff. I went fast because I know you can rewind and pause. So just make sure that you make use of this video to help you use your calculator better. Thank you so much.